The man who owned half the city woke up one morning and decided to own nothing at all. His name was Cash in Vain, though for the next 6 months, no one would call him that. To the world, he would become a ghost with a pulse, a quiet, hollowed-out version of himself named Caspar Reed, a construction worker buried in debt and bad luck. The lie was sown so carefully that even his own reflection began to believe it. Cash in Vain had inherited an empire built on fear, loyalty, and blood. His father had passed him the syndicate in a deathbed whisper, and Cashin had worn the crown so long that the metal had fused to his skull. Women threw themselves at him in clubs, at galas, in the back seats of armored cars. They touched his cufflinks before they touched his hand. They asked about his private jet before they asked about his childhood. He had been loved the way a bank vault is loved, for what it contained, never for its rust. So he decided to empty the vault. He left Dorian Cross in charge, gave him 2 rules: protect the territory, and do not interfere with whatever happened next. Then Cashin walked away from a penthouse with heated floors and moved into a studio apartment above a condemned bakery. The ceiling leaked. The radiator sounded like a dying animal. The previous tenant had left behind a single fork and a photograph of someone else's family. Cashin kept the fork. He burned the photograph. His new wardrobe came from a donation bin behind a church. His new name, Caspar Reed, was carved into a fake ID that cost him $500 from a forger who didn't ask questions. His new story was simple: a laborer who had lost everything in a divorce and a bad business deal. He rehearsed the lie until it tasted like truth. He practiced looking tired. He practiced looking hungry. He practiced looking like a man who had never ordered someone's death over dessert. The first week, he visited 3 different bars in the poorest districts of the city. He sat alone, nursed cheap whiskey, and waited. Women approached him exactly twice. The first asked if he owned the rundown bar itself. When he said no, she walked away before his glass hit the table. The second asked if he had a car. He pointed to the bus stop outside. She laughed, not with him, and joined a man in a leather jacket who was already holding keys. Cashin felt nothing. He had expected this. He had planned for it. What he had not planned for was the loneliness, not the absence of women, but the absence of anyone looking at him like he was a person. The cashier at the corner store looked through him. The landlord forgot his name twice. The neighbors slammed their doors when he passed. He had been feared for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be invisible. It was, he discovered, a different kind of power. An uglier one. By the second week, he stopped going to bars. He started going to places where people had no choice but to sit still: the laundromat on Fuller Avenue, the soup kitchen behind St. Jude's, the bench outside the 24-hour pharmacy that stayed open because the owner was too stubborn to admit defeat. It was at that pharmacy that he first saw her. Her name was Vesper Sterling. She worked the night shift alone, counting pills and ringing up the desperate, mothers buying cough syrup for feverish children, old men picking up heart medication with wrinkled bills, addicts shuffling in for methadone with their eyes on the floor. Vesper Sterling moved behind the counter like she had all the time in the world, even when the line wrapped past the magazine rack. She was not beautiful in the way Cashin's former lovers had been beautiful. She was soft where they had been sharp. She was quiet where they had been loud. Her body took up space in a way that made other women uncomfortable and other men cruel. She had heard the word fat whispered behind her back so many times that she had stopped turning around to see who said it. She was, in every measurable way, exactly the kind of woman the world had taught Cashin to overlook. Which was precisely why he could not stop watching her. He started timing his visits. 10 minutes before her shift ended. He would buy something small: a roll of gauze, a single bandage, a tube of antiseptic he did not need, and he would pay with crumpled bills he had intentionally wrinkled. She never rushed him. She never glanced at the clock. She counted his change twice, not because she mistrusted him, but because she mistrusted everyone equally, and that, for some reason, felt like respect. On the 17th night, it rained. Not the gentle kind. The kind that flooded gutters and turned bus stops into islands. Cashin stood under the pharmacy's awning, pretending to wait for a bus he knew would not come. He had forgotten to bring an umbrella, or rather, he had chosen to forget, because Caspar Reed would not own an umbrella. Caspar Reed would stand in the rain and accept it. Vesper locked the pharmacy door at 2 in the morning, pulled her hood over her hair, and stopped when she saw him. She looked at his worn boots. She looked at his threadbare jacket. She looked at the rain running down his face, and she did not ask if he had a car. She did not ask if he owned property. She simply reached into her bag, pulled out a second umbrella she carried for no practical reason, and held it out to him. "You look like you've been standing in the rain your whole life," she said. Her voice was low and unhurried. "Take it. I live 3 blocks away. You look like you live further." Cashin took the umbrella. He did not thank her. He did not smile. He stood there holding her umbrella while she walked away into the downpour without one, and something inside his chest cracked open along a fault line he did not know existed. He followed her at a distance that night, not to scare her, but to make sure she got home safely. She lived in a brick building with a broken intercom and a staircase that groaned. She climbed to the 3rd floor, unlocked 2 deadbolts, and disappeared inside. Cashin stood across the street for 20 minutes in the rain, holding her umbrella closed, getting soaked anyway. The next night, he returned the umbrella. He left it hanging on her doorknob with a note that said only, "*You forgot this." He signed it with the letter C. She found it before dawn. She never mentioned it when he came into the pharmacy the following week. But she started making his coffee before he asked. She started remembering his name, Casper, the name he hated because it was a lie. She started setting aside the Sunday crossword for him because she noticed he finished it faster than anyone else who came in. Cashin Vane, the man who had crushed rivals under his heel, the man who had never apologized for a single thing in his adult life, began to feel something he had never felt before, the slow, suffocating weight of being seen by someone who expected nothing from him. And that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. Because Vesper Sterling did not know about the blood on his hands. She did not know about the bodies buried in 3 different counties. She did not know that the quiet, tired man she poured coffee for had once made a rival beg for mercy for 6 hours before granting it. She just thought he was poor. She just thought he was lonely. She just thought he was a man who needed an umbrella. And Cashin, for the first time in his life, wished that was all he was. But across the city, Dorian Cross was watching. And in the shadows of Cashin's abandoned empire, a rival family had begun to whisper. A note appeared on the dashboard of Cashin's fake car, a car he had bought with cash from a junkyard. The note was written on expensive paper, the kind that did not belong in this neighborhood. *, even nothing has a price, Mr. Vane. We are coming to collect. *. Cashin read it twice. Then he folded it into a small square, tucked it into his worn jacket pocket, and walked to the pharmacy for his nightly coffee. He smiled at Vesper like nothing had happened. She smiled back. And the lie grew teeth. Weeks passed like water through cracked fingers. Cashin fell into a rhythm he had never known he needed. His days as Casper Reed began at dawn with instant coffee and ended at midnight with a walk beside Vesper Sterling. He had invented a fake job at a fake construction site, which meant his real work was watching her. He learned the way she tapped her fingers against the pharmacy counter when she was thinking. He learned that she hated small talk but could discuss the migration patterns of monarch butterflies for 40 minutes without repeating a fact. He learned that her mother had died 3 years ago, and that Vesper had bathed her, fed her, and turned her in bed for 18 months before the end. No one had helped her. No one had offered. She had simply done it alone, and then she had gone back to work the week after the funeral because the pharmacy could not afford to hire a replacement. Cashin told himself he was gathering information. That was what men like him did. They observed. They catalogued. They found weaknesses. But the truth was uglier. He was falling in love with a woman who thought he was a failure, and he was terrified that she would stop looking at him the moment she learned the truth. One night, 3 men followed them home from the diner. They were drunk and bored and looking for someone smaller to hurt. Cashin prepared to break bones. But Vesper stepped in front of him before he could move. She looked at the largest man and recited his full name, his last known address, and the petty theft charge he had caught 2 years ago. She told him the pharmacy's security camera had captured his face, and that she would personally deliver the footage to his parole officer if he took one more step. The men left. Cashin stared at her. "You memorized their records," he said. "I memorize everyone's," she replied. "It passes the time." That night, he walked her to her door and stood there longer than necessary. She did not invite him inside. She did not need to. The space between them had become its own kind of room, crowded with things neither of them would say. He went home and burned his last Mafia ring in a dented saucepan. The metal melted into a misshapen lump. He kept it in his pocket like a stone. The next morning, Vesper found a torn photograph in the laundromat's lost and found. It showed a man in a tailored black suit, standing on a yacht, his face half turned from the camera. She recognized the line of his jaw. She recognized the set of his shoulders. She slipped the photograph into her coat without showing anyone. And she said nothing. The truth arrived on a Tuesday night, wrapped in a bullet. Cashin had taken Vesper to a charity bingo game at the community center, her idea, not his. She liked the old women there. She liked the way they pinched her cheeks and called her dear. Cashin sat in the back, watching the exits the way he always did, when the side door opened and a man in a cheap jacket walked in. The man was not there for bingo. He crossed the room too fast. His hand stayed inside his pocket. His eyes locked onto Cashin and did not blink. Vesper was laughing at something one of the old women said when the man stopped 3 feet from Cashin and whispered a single sentence, Mr. Vane, your father's debt is still open. Dorian Cross appeared from nowhere. He grabbed the man by the collar and dragged him out the side door before anyone else noticed. But Vesper noticed. She had stopped laughing. She was looking at Cashin, no, at Casper, with an expression he had never seen on her face before. She did not scream. She did not cry. She stood up, folded her bingo card, and walked out the main door without looking back. Cashin followed her home in silence. The rain had stopped days ago, but the streets were still wet. His boots squeaked against the pavement. She did not speed up. She did not slow down. She simply walked to her building, climbed the 3 flights, and unlocked her deadbolts one by one. He caught the door before it closed. Vesper. She did not turn around. Her back was straight. Her keys were still in her hand. You let me tell you about my mother's funeral, she said quietly. You sat on my couch and held my hand while I cried. And all the while, you were wearing a watch under your sleeve that costs more than this entire building. Get away from my door. She closed it. He heard the lock turn. He heard the second lock turn. Then he heard nothing at all. Cashin sat down in the hallway. He stayed there that night, and the next night, and the night after that. The neighbors stepped over him. The landlord threatened to call the police. Cashin did not move. On the 3rd night, the door opened. Vesper stood in the doorway in her pharmacy uniform. Her eyes were red but dry. In her hands, she held a thick ledger book. You want to earn me back, she said. Her voice was steel wrapped in exhaustion. Someone has been stealing from the pharmacy's charity fund. The one that buys medicine for children. Find out who. Use your hands, not your goons. And do not lie to me again. Cashin looked up at her. He did not promise. He did not explain. He simply took the ledger from her hands and opened it to the first page. She stepped aside. He walked in. They worked in silence for 5 nights. Vesper read numbers aloud. Cashin traced them backward through accounts and shell companies until the trail grew warm. The thief was not a small-time embezzler. The money moved from the pharmacy's charity fund to a real estate developer, then to a city councilman named Harold Wynne, then finally into the pockets of the Volkov family, Cashin's oldest rivals. He told Vesper everything. She did not flinch. You knew him, she said. The councilman. Before you became Casper. I had dinner at his house, Cashin admitted. He asked for permission to run for office. I gave it to him because his wife made excellent lamb. Vesper closed the ledger. Then you're going to fix this. Tonight. She refused to stay behind. Cashin argued. She walked out the door. He followed. Councilman Wynne lived in a gated house that pretended to be modest. Vesper knocked on his front door while Cashin stood in the shadows. Wynne opened it in his bathrobe, confused, then terrified when he recognized the man behind her. The Volkov family's men arrived within minutes. They had been watching Wynne's house. They had been waiting for Cashin to make a mistake. Vesper was grabbed first. A hand over her mouth. A gun to her ribs. Cashin froze as they dragged her to a black van. The Volkov captain spoke through the window, your territory for her life. 1 hour. The warehouse on Lear Street. Cashin did not negotiate. He did not call Dorian. He walked to the warehouse alone. They had tied Vesper to a wooden chair in the center of the concrete floor. Her lip was split. Her glasses were missing. She looked small in a way she had never looked before. Cashin knelt without being told. He placed his keys, his phone, and the melted lump of his old ring on the floor between them. Take it all, he said. Let her go. The Volkov captain laughed. He raised a gun to Vesper's temple. Vesper spat at his shoes. You didn't read the fine print, she said. Her voice was calm. Her hands were shaking. I'm the one who tracks his money. And while you were busy grabbing me, I moved every dollar you own into an offshore account. The password is in my head. You kill me, you die poor. You kill him, I let the account rot. Let us go, and I'll give you back enough to walk away. The captain stared at her. Cashin stared at her. The gun trembled. Vesper smiled with bloody teeth. The captain lowered the weapon. He cut her ropes with a knife. Cashin lunged forward and put himself between her and the door. They walked out backward, step by step, until they hit the street. A gunshot cracked behind them. Cashin felt the bullet tear through his left shoulder before he heard the sound. He kept walking. He kept Vesper in front of him. He did not stop until they reached her apartment. She stitched his wound with pharmacy thread while he sat on her bathroom floor. Her hands were steady. "You could have died," she said. "So could you," he replied. She tied off the stitch and kissed his unhurt shoulder. It was not a romantic kiss. It was a furious one. "Don't you ever kneel for me again," she whispered. "Make them kneel for us." Cashin healed in Vesper's apartment for 2 weeks. She changed his bandages every morning and made him instant coffee every night. He offered to walk away from the Mafia entirely, to sell everything and disappear with her to a country where no one knew his name. She refused. "I didn't survive a warehouse to hide in a cottage," she said. "You built an empire. Now teach me how to help you keep it." Together, they drafted a new treaty. Vesper's copy of the councilman's stolen ledger became the hammer. Cashin's remaining loyalists became the anvil. The Volkov family agreed to peace in exchange for one port route and Harold Wynn's resignation. The councilman fled the country within a week. The pharmacy's charity fund was restored threefold. Dorian Cross bowed to Vesper in the mansion's foyer. She did not acknowledge it. She was too busy rearranging Cashin's bookshelves. He found her in his study at midnight, surrounded by ledgers and maps. She had refused to move into the mansion, so he had started sleeping on her pull-out couch. That night, he knelt in her tiny kitchen, not in surrender, but in question. He placed the melted lump of his burned ring in her palm. "Marry me," he said. "Not because I have money. Because I have nothing without you." Vesper looked at the misshapen metal. She closed her fingers around it. "If you ever pretend to be poor again," she said, "I'll make sure you actually are." He laughed. She kissed him. They stayed in her apartment for 3 more months before she agreed to take one room in the mansion, just one, and only because it had better light for reading. The city whispered that Cashin Vane had gone soft. His enemies learned otherwise the first time Vesper Sterling negotiated a territory dispute over the phone while grading pharmacy inventory sheets. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She simply explained, in numbers, why the other family would lose everything if they did not agree. They agreed. Cashin watched her from the doorway. She looked up and caught him staring. "What?" she said. He shook his head. "Nothing. You're just the most dangerous person I've ever met." She returned to her ledger. "I know." He had started the journey searching for a woman who wanted nothing from him. He had ended it kneeling before a woman who wanted everything: his truth, his future, his teeth, and his tender parts. She did not love him despite his darkness. She loved him because she had learned to navigate her own. Vesper Sterling was never forgotten again. If you enjoyed The Price of Nothing, subscribe now for more dark romance stories delivered straight to your inbox. New chapters. New lies. New love that burns.